we have invited three of the people involved with FYI, which I think is kind of fun acronym. And they're going to talk to us about their program for assisting youth who are aging out of foster care, and also a facility that is opening soon, and perhaps some things that we might be able to do to help them with their welcoming of these young folks to a new part of their lives. So what we normally do is ask you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
I can start.
Go for it.
So I'm Angela Youtsey. I am a Belfair native, born and raised out there, live in Seebeck now. And for the last 12 years, I've run a foster care agency here in Silverdale. We do foster care, kind of Hood Canal Bridge down to Shelton for that office. And then we also do the independent living skills contract here for Kitsap County. And prior to that, did some contract work with DCYF up here and some school social work down in LA while I was down there. And then about 3 years ago, got to start talking to Jill and Greg about this project, and off we went.
And now we're best friends.
Yeah.
So I'm Jill Stanton. I think I met most of you, maybe was it a year or two ago? I'm the executive director at Bremerton Housing Authority, and I've been here for just over 3 years, but I've been in Housing Authority, affordable housing work for about 20 years. And I have always wanted to do a program for foster youth aging out of foster care. That's been in my heart for ever since my first boss, who said it's not going to happen. And here we are 20 years later. I never let it go. So I'm super excited, as Greg can tell you.
Well, thanks, Jill. Thanks, Angela. Hi, everybody. I see Victoria and I know each other from former times. Connie, you look real familiar. So I don't know where I might have run across, but I'm been working for the state for a long time. My name's Greg Williamson, and I work out of Olympia, but I was born and raised in Rosedale, just, Gig Harbor area. So I live over there now. Again, being back closer to my parents. But I've worked for the state for 36 years. So we may have crossed paths in some other thing. I used to work at the legislature and the US Senate and the Department of Early Learning and the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And then at some point, Department of Early Learning got eaten by this larger thing called the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And so in 2020, at the end of 2020, I got assigned to something that I didn't know anything about, which was child welfare housing. And I've been mostly K-12 education and other things in my life, so I didn't really have very much housing experience. And I just found out about this little kind of program that could have been great, but hadn't done too much in Washington State yet. And I'll talk just a little bit about the program. Okay, so I'll tell you what I told them, and then here's what happened after, and I'll do it kind of quick. Since about 1990, there's been a thing at the federal level called the the Family Unification Program, FUP. And those are vouchers that are the same thing as Section 8 or housing choice vouchers. All of these are somewhat synonymous, and then there are different populations that they're eligible for. This Family Unification Program voucher had 3 different groups it was targeted at. One was families that are reunifying with a child because of child welfare. One would be families where you can use the voucher to prevent dependency and keep a young person housed with the birth parents. And then the third part is the youth part, which was just called FUP Youth. He said very carefully, so it doesn't sound like something else. That program has been around for a long time too. But this was a competitive program from the Housing and Urban Development arm of the federal government, and it only went to 10 counties in Washington State, and 10 was actually a fair amount. There's a lot of states where they don't even have 10 counties, but Seattle, Tacoma, Spokane, Vancouver area all had these vouchers for all 3 of those populations. it, at various points in time, but the program goes back to 19. When I started this job 3 years ago, there was something new that had happened, and that was this creation of this Foster Youth to Independence, or FYI voucher, which is just a renaming of that youth voucher. So we'll talk a little bit about the eligibility and things, but that was new about 5 years ago. Some young people at the national level said, we want a by name, on-demand housing voucher for young people coming out of foster care who don't have maybe typical family investments in their launch, right? They don't have resources. They have no credit history a lot of times. They have no rental history, and we want them to be successful. And so at the national level, they renamed this program FYI. And there were exactly 2 of these things that we're trying to launch in Washington. Our friend Lowell in Yakima was the housing authority person there, and they had a voucher, and they had 1 or 2 vouchers. And I don't think that they had even had one person lease up and go all the way through. They were kept trying. This young person would try, and the paperwork would be too much, or this young person would try, and they'd have some kind of an obstacle. So that was kind of fledgling program in Yakima. And another one in Bellingham, and they had, again, 1 or 2 young people and 1 or 2 vouchers, but not much was going. There was another competition that happened, and Tacoma got 75 of these vouchers. Seattle got 75. King County got 75 of these youth vouchers. King County and Seattle went back and got more of them. So there's quite a lot of these vouchers in Seattle, King County. But at the time when we started having this conversation, I was putting on my Pied Piper hat and going to 39 counties and having this conversation about who wants to try this out and see if we can make it work. Because we're going beyond 10 counties to any county in the state could do it. If you're a housing authority like Jill, you can apply and get up to 25 of these vouchers. That's not a huge number for a housing authority, but it's new vouchers that they didn't already have. So it does have some kind of revenue aspect for the housing authority. And then we sign a thing at DCYF, which I don't really understand why the federal government did it this way, but they said that the child welfare agency, state child welfare agency, needs to sign on, and HUD provides the voucher to Jill. Jill provides the voucher to the young person. That pays their rent. But every single other thing that they need, and that's a long list that we'll get into, but every other thing that they need to get that voucher and make it work has to be provided or secured by the state child welfare agency. And we are not a housing organization. And so that's where Angela's group comes in, is we contract with Angela's group to provide the housing supportive services to the young people to make the voucher possible and successful. I'll talk eligibility and then I'll transfer over to my pals. Eligibility is, if you're a young person, you have to have been in formal state foster care. And then I say what that means dependent and in out-of-home placement at any point between your 16th and your 18th birthday. So even if it was just for a week, as long as you were dependent in out-of-home placement between 16 and 18, you're eligible for this program. And then now currently you are between your 18th birthday and your 25th birthday. And we did have a young person lease up on the last day she was 24. So it can be done. And then the voucher's good for 3 years, and you can renew it for 2 more years or extend it for 2 more years if you do education or employment stuff.
Can you say that again?
Yep.
Voucher, the
3-year
first
voucher, and you
Uh-huh.
can extend it for 2 years if you participate in education and employment work. And then the last kind of big thing is you have to be out of foster care or out of extended foster care for 90 days. And we're doing the most liberal interpretation of that. We're saying you can lease up. You go through this whole process of getting a housing voucher. When you lease up, a clock starts ticking. You got 90 days to leave foster care. And the reason that we do that is because the feds, in the federal law, it says this program is for people who have left foster care behind. And so your eligibility is determined by your foster care status. There's some language in there about, are you homeless or have you been at risk of homelessness? And we categorically say that if you're in the Washington State foster care system, you are at risk of homelessness, because about somewhere between 20 and 30% of the young people that we deal with on the past many, many years are homeless, literally homeless within 1 year. So that's a big enough, significant enough challenge. And we don't know can't predict who's going to have success and who isn't. So we try to be, again, follow the letter of the law as much as we can and be as liberal as possible in our approach to things like, let's start the clock on the lease up day, for example. So that's kind of how the program eligibility works. And there are, this is where I get to brag. There are 39 counties. There are 10 counties that had a head start of 20 years. There are quite a few states in the country that are trying this or doing this or have been participating in the earlier program. Bremerton Kitsap is the national leader in communities of this size, and Bremerton is the group that I believe that there are a couple others that were also in helping us do this, but I believe that Bremerton was uniquely placed to help the state legislature see the value of this program and invest some money. This in 2023, they invested $7.6 million for this biennium. And I just don't think that this would have worked without Bremerton and Bremerton's leadership, specifically Kirsten Jewell and Jill, working out a situation with Olive Crest and Kitsap Community Resources and the Educational Service District that allowed the county to put some one-time COVID money in and purchase a person named Bethany Wex, who's not here yet, or not here today, but works with Angela. That one investment of that one person in this one town, in this one county, in this one state really made the difference. And we've been able to do a whole bunch of other stuff after that. But my favorite part of the story is when I told everybody all this same stuff that I told you, and then I left. And Kirsten said, well, what do you think? And everybody said, sounds cool. And Kirsten said, well, I'm pretty sure it's not going to work based on what I just heard without somebody to make it function. So she did everything she could to make sure that we had Bethany to make it work. But my favorite part is, Williamson talks a good game, but it didn't sound like that's actually going to work. And then they made it work. So Jill, Angela, what else do people need to know right now?
Well, I don't think I could describe it any better than what he just did. I'll just go back to the beginning though with Kirsten. She told me on day one that we met here that in Kitsap County, our superpower is our partnerships. And I've never forgotten that. And it's been powerful in my time here. And when she said, when they started talking to me about this, I knew about these programs. I've been in the housing authority world for a very long time, but it never worked because you didn't have the housing navigation services. And for just a voucher holder that we have that's not a young adult, that doesn't have that traumatic experience of being in foster care, we had about a 30% success rate when we give somebody a voucher because there's nothing that comes with it to help them. So, that's what Kirsten, understood, that without that piece, there will be zero success rate. With that piece, we turned it into 100% success rate. So that is where it kind of all started, but it didn't end with just the voucher. And we'll get into this more, but because I want to give Angela a little bit of time to talk about what her organization does. But this program led to much bigger issues being noticed in our county, in particular, the fact that there really is no good solutions for young adults, whether you're a young adult exiting foster care or experiencing homelessness or at risk. There's no good place, there's no good options. We've had landlords that are willing to take some of these young adults, but in general, there's not like one place where you can solidly say, okay, you're ready for housing. We've got this place for you. And by the way, we're going to have services on site to help you be successful. And so this program led to that, but we'll talk a little bit about that later, and I'll let you talk about Olive Crest.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. The partnerships is what has made this kind of a superpower in work. Olive Crest, we've done independent living skills here in Kitsap County for 15 to 20 years now. And to qualify for what we call ILS, kids have to have been in foster care 30 days or more past their 15th birthday. So 2.5 years ago, all we had in terms of housing for our foster youth was $15,000 a year from the county that we could use to pay for rent. If someone lost a job, if someone had a baby, we could do kind of a one-time payment. But that was really what we had for youth exiting foster care. And the housing that kids would exit to, I remember dropping a twin bed off that my friend had donated because someone was getting their first apartment. You know how it goes, and dropping it off, and there was no lock on the front door. And I just remember leaving, like, I would never leave my daughter in that apartment. I wouldn't feel safe. Like, she would never end up there. But that was housing for this kid and what we had. And so when this opportunity came up and we started talking with Jill and Greg, one of the things we knew was that filling out paperwork is not a strength of our youth. Think of filling out a mortgage and, you know, with no help or assistance whatsoever. And so as we got to talk and dream about, you know, what would it look like to have opportunities for our youth to have some kind of planned housing, you know, as they exited care, it was exciting. And it was something that we wanted to sign on to, and something we felt we were uniquely positioned for. We already had 75 to 80 of those youth that we were working with here in the county. We knew who the youth were. We had relationship with them, and it allowed us to help them take that next step in a meaningful and sustainable way. So we were excited to sign on.
And then Bethany is, if
A rock star.
If Kitsap's secret weapon is partnership, Bethany is all of Crest and this whole project secret weapon, because she just talks to people like you would want to be talked to in a respectful way, thinking about, like, if this was my kid, what would I do?
Yeah.
And so she goes to specifically, I always get parts of it wrong, but I think the story is generally true. She identified people in the community who were property owners who had not typically dealt with low income housing, right? So they were apartment owners and other folks who knew about housing, but they hadn't had all the experience of dealing with low income housing.
Well, can I jump in on that? And
Please
just
do.
say, what I love about Bethany has adopted children of her own. She has a passion and believes in not only this program and helping youth, but how it can sustainably change a community by supporting these youth. And when we were working with BHA, and, you know, they gave us the Section 8 list of here's the apartments, here's who will rent to Section 8 voucher holders. Bethany tore the list up and said, that is not what we want for our kids. We want our kids to move into a place that they can be proud of and that they can help take care of and be a part of a community. So then she went out.
So then she goes to those places where she would want her child to live. And she says, would you like to help a young person exit foster care and become a productive member of our community? And I'm going to say no to that. And then she said, would it be okay if the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development sent a rent check to your bank account electronically every month? And maybe unlike some of your other renters, it was totally predictable and secure. And here's my card. My name's Bethany. Would it be good if you had any problems in communication with the young person, or they were intimidated about talking to a property owner, that I could be the intermediary and help make that go? And landlords, property owners said yes to Bethany, that they wanted to do it. And then they came back and said, hey, this is working pretty well for the first 3. Can I get 3 more?
And she's now, I mean, we're 2.5 years into this, and Bethany has a list of 18 to 22. It keeps growing, but in that realm of property management and private landlords that not only will they rent to our youth if she calls them, they call her when they have an opening and say, hey, do you have youth coming down the pipe? We have this opening, wanted to check in and see if someone needs it. So it's an exciting turn of events for us.
And that's at a time when they could go in the private market after COVID and charge essentially whatever they want for an apartment. But this program is a federal program, and while it's consistent and predictable and all of those things secure, you don't get to charge whatever you want. You have to charge market rate rent. And Jill, because she's a rock star, spent some money to get the FMR, the market rate rent, increased, and some flexibility to be able to pay a little bit more in Bremerton than they could before, and that's been great. But these landlords could go get more money from somebody else, but they'd rather work with Bethany and this project and these young people. And so the first big victory was a photograph. Imagine a photograph of a young person's hand with their keys going in to turn the key on their first ever apartment.
Yeah.
And that first person was a mom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a fair amount of our young people already have their own children as well. And so imagine moving into from whatever, chaos or maybe not you had before. Maybe you had a really good foster care situation and one placement that lasted till your 18th birthday. That's not the typical story for our teenagers, right?
Mhm.
So if you had chaos in your life before, but you have now a place where you can call home. And prior to this program, we had young people move into places. And then one of two things would occasionally happen, which is they would bring their street family with them into the apartment and then get kicked out for that.
Yeah.
Or they would move into the apartment and say, I don't want to be by myself, and go back to somebody's couch and leave the apartment sitting there. So now it's really the Bethanization of this that has made it good, which is the young person feels supported, right? And we're not saying that the only way to live is in your own apartment by yourself with your own key. That's not what we're saying. But for people that want that, and for people who need some security and some predictability and some people who care about them in their life at a key juncture, when they may not have family to do it, this program's been able to really help do that.
Well, and it's helped the larger voucher program as well, because prior to this program, we were not having landlords calling us wanting voucher holders. That was not something that was very common experience for us. But now, because of this, and also because of COVID, the housing authority became the real deal. Like, people didn't have to pay during COVID and they weren't going to be evicted, but the housing authority continued to pay, and we continued to raise what we would pay. And then, like Greg was saying, we got our standards raised by about 20%, which made a lot more landlords willing to participate in our program. So it really had a big effect. And we just think of Bethany as Wonder Woman. I mean, she's
Yeah.
really incredible. She's got an incredible supportive boss who just
Lets her go.
lets her go. Yeah.
Do your thing.
And it's difficult. If you've ever been on a BHA program, it's like filling out a mortgage. This paperwork
It's
is not
30
easy.
pages.
And-
Except that every time, even once you've got the house and you buy your house, every time you get a raise from your employer, or every time you move jobs, you have to fill out another
I know,
mortgage.
exactly.
And that's where I think Bethany, our kids would have lost housing
Mhm.
so many times if Bethany wasn't there. Like, just a reminder, I heard you changed jobs.
Yeah, report.
And I mean, just some examples I would give you of how it's worked. We've had moms and dads move in with their children. But we've had youth who have aged out of the system and taken placement of their younger siblings. And so they've been able to get their siblings out of the foster care system, living with them through having a place to stay with the FYI voucher and providing stability. One of my favorite stories is, through FYI, we're telling our kids, save money, right? Put some money in savings in the bank so that not everything is a crisis. And one of our young adults, the older I get, the younger they are, but he called his case manager and said, I had a flat tire this morning. And for us, that's usually a crisis with a kid, because a flat tire means they didn't get to work, means they lost their job, right? It just tapers on. And the case manager's like, okay, what do we need to do? He's like, no, I've been putting money in savings like you told me to. I called Les Schwab. They came, they changed my tire, and I was even on time for work. And so for us, that's a huge win. Like, not only was it not a crisis, you got it handled before you called your case manager. You made it to work on, like, all the things we want for you. And that is just how some of the stability of having housing and being able to start saving and thinking about those second tier needs is impacting them and giving them stability down the road.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, then they have to call me and tell me the story in the moment.
Yeah.
Because they just don't. I think maybe just to share some numbers. So we've had 22
Mhm.
young adults get these vouchers and get housed. 5 of them have either given it back because they no longer need it, or they've poured it out of our county. So currently we have 16 housed and one about to be
One about
housed.
to be.
And we can go up to 25, but then if we get to the 25, then we can ask for more. We can get some for the other housing authority in our county. So it's, yeah, the program is very life-changing.
And there are things that the program does a good job at, and there are gaps. So my metaphor for this is, because initially when I was Pied Pipering around the state, we have a great idea. We have a federal resource. We are required as a state agency to go out and try to provide or secure those housing supportive services. And I won't go into all the details of it, but at the beginning of it, we still had a relationship with Angela's organization, but we weren't paying them specifically for this. And the legislature now allows us to pay them specifically for this service. We were paying them for the independent living services and just assuming that out of their goodness of their heart, they would be able to help us with this other thing, housing.
Which we couldn't, but I will say Kitsap County stepped in the gap.
They do.
And they paid for Bethany's position for the first 2 years, which gave Greg what he needed to go to the legislature and say, this is making all the difference, having someone that can walk kids through this and that landlords can call when they're like, I'm a little concerned and I need someone to help. We're like, okay, I mean, that's what we do.
So we basically made a sales pitch to the state legislature, and essentially it worked. And then now we have contracts in place. They didn't give us enough money to do this at every county level, and they didn't actually give us enough money to do this at every regional level, but we're doing it at every regional level anyway. So there are 6 DCYF regions around the state, and we now have contracts in place for organizations that are named Olive Crest or that are like Olive Crest in other parts of the state. So in Eastern Washington, it's Catholic Charities out of Yakima. In Northwest Washington, it's YouthNet out of Skagit and Whatcom and Snohomish counties. In Region 5, which is Pierce County and Kitsap County. And then in Region 6, which is all the rest of Southwest Washington, including the Olympic Peninsula, 11 counties in Region 6, 2 counties in Region 5, a lot of young people. Olive Crest is now signed on with us at I think, unfortunately, a too low of a dollar amount, but enough of a dollar amount to keep Bethany and to hire a couple more people like Bethany to do outreach to 13 counties in Southwest Washington. And so my metaphor is, in the initial days when I came to them a couple of years, 2.5 years ago or whatever it was, we were asking for baling wire and duct tape to try to put together a system. And then we sold that idea to the legislature, and now we have new baling wire and new duct tape from the legislature. And what we really want to do is get this to be a system. So for the 2025 to 2027 biennium, we're going to go back to the legislature and ask for probably at least double the money to do this statewide, because we really have it's a system right now, but it's a system like a 1980 Honda Civic with
We're doing
the
a lot of
wires.
community math.
Exactly.
Like, we have these resources, but what is in the communities to support?
Yeah.
to
So
support
if we can get to a used Honda Civic
Yeah.
from what we've got now, I think that'll be good. We're not trying to build a Cadillac.
Okay.
So that amount would be about,
Well, right now we asked them for 17 million
Okay.
last time, and they gave us 7.6. And that's to do families and young people. So about 2.5 million of it is for young people, and about 5 million of it is for the family portion of the same project. So in the same region where we're working with Olive Crest, we're also working with a group called Reliable Enterprises out of Lewis County, and they're doing this same kind of thing that Angela talked about, but for families. And we've housed 110 families in Southwest Washington in the last 2 years, and served about another 40 or 50 with on over the phone case management, or just a deposit check or something like that. So all together, it's been You know, between King County, where we had a similar program, and Southwest, we've served a couple hundred families with housing over the past couple of years. And then we're now going to serve a few hundred young people with these youth vouchers. And then we just signed with Jill's organization. Jill's a member of the state organization of housing authorities, and DCYF just signed a memorandum of understanding with them over the next few years, where they're pledging 2,100 vouchers or apartments to our child welfare clients across the state. And I want to talk about what I think that means to Kitsap County. What I think that means is it puts the child welfare stuff that Jill was thinking about years ago in the conversation with your other housing initiatives. You have a homeless problem, you have a homeless veterans problem, you have the base and other folks who probably are already in those conversations. You didn't have DCYF and some of the state agencies in this game in the same way. And when we enter the conversation, even if we're only able to help 25 young people, those 25 young people, because of this service, can change the way that all the landlords in the county look at working with these populations or with the state. So if it can help child welfare population, and you're already doing stuff for veterans, and then you've got emergency vouchers, and then you've got your regular low income, and then you've got people who don't have any kind of relationship with the housing authority, but just want to rent apartments in the county, we're now part of the conversation to grow the pie bigger. So there's a couple things that have happened that have actually grown the pie bigger. And Jill's got one for some families that may or may not be our families, and then she's got this other one for youth. So.
Yeah, so should we kind of pivot
Yeah,
to that?
yeah.
That's a good introduction. Thank you. So one of the things that this program brought to light, well, it shed light, I guess, on the larger community, in that we're helping young people. And that brought other people who are offering services to young adults, like Kitsap Mental Health Services, Scarlet Road, Coffee Oasis, to the table. And they were like, can we talk about this? Because it's bigger than just the young adults aging out of foster care. We're trying to provide services to this age group, and we're not successful because they don't have a stable place to live. And this is great what you're doing for the foster young adults. We support that. And even in that program, sometimes it is a challenge, even with, landlords willing to take some need just more. They need more services. They need stuff on site. And so about 2 years ago, as we were launching this, another working group started between the Housing Authority and the groups I just mentioned. And we started saying, okay, there's no good options here. Coffee Oasis, they do what they can, but they don't have any large, place where they can put people to live once they turn 18. And so we thought, well, what would it look like if each of us was able to bring what we do best to the table and provide some actual units of housing specifically for this population? And we didn't have a place in mind. I had a place in mind, but we didn't really have anything secured. So the working group, we met on a monthly basis, and all the service providers started talking about what they could do on site. And we just kind of formed this informal project. And the big piece missing was the place. Well, at that time, I had been making relationships with a lot of the developers, and a lot of developers here in Kitsap really have a heart for voucher holders, affordable housing, young adults. And one in particular, you probably all know him, Dale Sperling, was, he's just a very creative guy out of Bainbridge, does a lot of work here in Bremerton, and wants to make a difference. And so he's building these units. He's dragging me all over town, showing me what he's doing. And the thing about Dale and I is I always start like, yeah, we can do this. There's no reason why. And people shut us down a lot, but we think a lot the same in that manner. And so he takes me to this project up here on Warren, and we start looking at it. And I just realized this is the place. It's studios, 1 bedrooms mostly, a few 2 bedrooms, just a beautiful place right across the street from KCR, and tons of services right around there. And so he starts saying, what, Jill, you say that you got all these vouchers, nobody has a place to live. what if we just rent to voucher holders? And I'm like, that would be amazing. 30 units for voucher holders, brand new, increasing the stock, that would be great. And I don't know, it was probably a couple of weeks later, he said, my partners are really nervous about renting to voucher holders. We don't know what we're doing. And I'm like, well, we could help you. He goes, can you manage it? I said, we'll manage it. That's great. We'll manage it. No problem. And maybe a couple of weeks after that, calls me up. He's like, do you just want to buy this place for that young adult thing you keep talking about? And I'm like, yes, I do. And so he said, well, what would that look like? Because he goes, you guys don't have any money. And I'm like, no, we don't have any money, but we can apply for grants, but that is a cycle. It doesn't happen right away. It's not like going to the bank and getting a loan. And this particular project, when you do the financial pro forma, it's not going to be able to handle debt because we're going to have to pay for a lot of other things. So I said, if you'll stick in here with me and let's go through the grant cycle, let's see what can happen. Let's just think about the first grant. And at the time, you might remember the 1%, the 1/10 of 1% tax had just passed. And so I knew that these funds would be coming up for our county, and they generate about $7 million annually, all for affordable housing. Some of it has to go for services and such. But when the county was trying to figure out how are they gonna, spend this money, they came to a bunch of us and they said, how do you guys want us to spend this money? And one of the key things that we said is, well, first of all, don't wait to be the last one in. If our county is the first one in funding these projects, then that shows you believe in us, and then our state is gonna, believe in us too. So don't take on that mindset, because most grants they just want to be the last one in. They want to see that you have something else first. And I said, and second, figure out what this county wants to do, where you want your focus to be, and give a large amount. Because if you just give tiny amounts to all these projects, it's going to take all these projects 10 years to get done. And we can, by taking an opposite approach, we can actually get something big in mind now. And so then they came out with their grant and we applied, but the Housing Authority didn't apply alone. We applied with all of our partners, and they all had their applications in too for other things. But I'll just never forget, we had an interview and it was me sitting there with 5 partners, all of whom were saying, if you can't fund everything, fund this project, because we're all going to be benefiting from this project and it's ready to go. So that was a huge moment. I remember, I think it was at a conference or something, flying home, and the day or 2 days before the state grant was due, the county made their announcement a day early, which is also very unheard of. But they said in their announcement, we know you all have some applications coming up in 2 days, so we want you to know what we're funding. Well, they funded this project $4 million, which I still get goosebumps when I say that, because that was we knew we needed between 10 and 11 million. And so that's a huge chunk. Part of it came from the city of Bremerton, and then part of it came from the Kitsap County. And so I called the developer and I said, look, we got $4 million. I believe with everything in me that we will get state money, because if, I didn't even tell you the part where the service providers also started applying for their own grants. They got fully funded for 5 years. And so this is kind of back to our concept of we're all going to do what we do best, and we're not going to be reliant on each other to provide that, because that'll take the weight off everybody's shoulders. I don't have to pay for services and they don't have to pay for housing. And so with that, we put in for the state grant. The state grant was a maximum of 5 million, but they allowed you a waiver if you needed to go higher. They allowed the Housing Authority probably 4 waivers to try to make this happen. So we felt like, they liked this project. There was only a couple others in Yakima that were doing young adult. So that was another thing. There's a real focus on young adult. Just long story short, we got the 6.5 million, but it didn't come easy. They were supposed to make their announcement in December. The contractor's, trying to finish up the building. He's not pre-leasing, which is unheard of because the construction lenders want you to pre-lease. And so he had all this pressure, but he's like, no, Jill keeps telling me like, they're not going to walk away from $4 million, and they're not going to walk away from these services. And, he's stuck in there with us, and the announcement wasn't even made until January 18th. And so, but, the building was still in the final finishing touches. And when that $6.5 million came in, and here's the other thing I just have to do, a shout out to the Bremerton Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. They were like, don't worry about this, Jill. It's gonna happen. The whole time, our chair, Jeffrey Flood, I would be calling him up like, I don't know, they delayed, there's nothing. He's like, Jill, this is gonna happen. You just have faith. We believe in you. And I'm like, it's not me, it's the state. I can't do anything here.
I'm emailing her every week. Have you heard?
Yeah, everybody was. And it was like, it's such a testament when this happened, that this was supposed to happen, like a dream from 20 years ago. And, God bless my boss, he has since passed away. He made me come to his funeral and sing Amazing Grace. And I didn't want to, but he was just like, he was a wonderful man, and he knew that I had this dream, and he didn't think it could ever happen. And just because of all of the difficult things, housing authorities have to deal with HUD. HUD wants us to do all this important work, but they make it impossible with the paperwork. But now this is starting to happen, and HUD is starting to say, hey, how can we make this easier? And so with this project, it was unheard of to have a project get fully funded without project-based vouchers. But the state said, wait, Bremerton Housing Authority has a different idea. Right now, we're just going to use the foster youth vouchers, and we're going to use referral vouchers. And we're going to trust that our partnerships are going to refer people in, and then they're going to provide the services that these people need to be successful. We're scared. We know it's not going to go perfect. We still need a whole bunch of things. We're fundraising for furniture right now. I don't know if you've heard this, but DCYF is now, another part of DCYF is giving Kitsap Mental Health Services 30 grand to buy things like grocery cards, plates, sheets, things like household items. They can't buy furniture with this money. But it was very exciting. They just told us this last week and said, by the way, you have till June 30th. And it's like, they can do it. So it's just an exciting thing. It's 24 units for households that are young adults. There will be 4 units that have dedicated services. Kitsap Mental Health Services is our main primary provider, and they will be on site 5 days a week. They're moving their entire young adult unit to this project. So they'll serve people living there, but they'll also serve people who are not living there. Olympic College is a partner. Peninsula Community Health Services will be bringing their medical vans on site. Let's see, Scarlet Road is a partner. I think I already said Coffee Oasis. Olympic Workforce Development, they will be providing workforce training on site. Basically, there is nobody that we ask to be a partner who says no to this. Nobody. And so KCR, of course, we're working with the local shelters. So yeah, I'll just be quiet there, but.
So Jill, we ended up with, you said did the state grant end up being 6.5?
It did.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. And then BHA's, so the total price ended up being 10.7 million. And so our Board of Commissioners will approve the Housing Authority to take the last 200,000. So it's really exciting. And the building is beautiful. We're going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony towards the end of May. One of the most special things that we didn't know was even happening, we went to tour the building, and it's 3 floors, and each door on each floor is they're painted different colors. So there'll be like a green door, a yellow door, a blue door. And at the Housing Authority, we have some very creative young staff members. And when they saw that, they were like, I want the yellow door. I want the green door. I mean, it was just an aspect of it that made you feel like they're going to love living here. This building is made for young adults. So,
What's it called?
Evergreen Bright Start.
So we've got 15 minutes till 11. So there's a few other little things, but just like as this story gets told, right? There's the story of the vouchers. There's the story of Evergreen Bright Start. She also figured out a way to buy 5 brand new homes for families from the Housing Authority at the same time. She also noticed one of my favorite parts of your story. We know each other's stories now pretty well. So I'm like, Jill, tell the part about, I'll just say that. Jill, tell the part about what the FYI voucher holders get and their time and process versus your other voucher holders, and why you wish all vouchers from HUD came with these? Okay.
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier that our other voucher holders, there's a 30% success rate because you can't just give somebody a voucher and expect that they're going to be able to find, somebody to rent to them, get over their credit history issues. I mean, there's a reason that they need this voucher. They have barriers in their life. But with the services that Angela's agency is providing, that just goes away. And so and that also happened with the emergency vouchers, where HUD at that point was kind of funding some of those services, and they saw a much higher success rate. So with those two programs, HUD is now saying, we might want to rethink the way we do vouchers, the way we fund them. But before HUD even had, that's a long-term change. Like, it's going to take a while. But our county and our city recognized it, and they actually funded a full-time housing navigator for the housing authority to be able to now help our other voucher holders. So it really,
Because like the time it takes
yeah,
to do the voucher, right? Just to get your application in. It takes a long time and not everybody completes that process. But for these programs with assistance, they were doing it much, much faster. And then the time to lease up for the other programs was super slow, but it's super fast for these programs, right? And young people can be squirrely and they change their mind about what they want to do.
and they
so-
don't come to their orientation.
And they don't come to their orientation.
They
And
don't.
Bethany's like having pizza parties and getting
Yeah.
people all together. So there's
Let's
a
go back
bunch.
to just like, excuse me,
It-
the county provided money for a position,
For a navigator.
navigator for BHA and housing Kitsap. No, just-
So it's for the voucher holders, but BHA does housing Kitsap's vouchers, so it's for both of
For
us.
both.
Yeah, so it's the county and the city both put in money for the housing
Okay,
navigator,
Thank you.
for both housing.
And I would add, it's not just filling out paperwork that Bethany and the housing
Right.
navigators are doing, it's getting vital documents. I mean, if you can imagine being homeless or moving frequently, birth certificates, bank statements, having a bank account. I mean, for our kids, just getting a valid state ID, those are challenges, the cost in obtaining them and navigating how to obtain them. That's also something that they work really hard with our youth on, getting those things that they will need, not just for this program, but to navigate adulthood and employment and further schooling.
So there are some gaps that still exist and there probably always will be. And the great thing about partnership is this gives us the capacity to go into communities and say, how do we make stone soup? What are the other things that are missing? Who can help? So welcome baskets for the young people to move in. So they've got cleaning supplies. Michael Mira has got a new video from Tacoma of a young person moving into the Tacoma project at Arlington Drive. And she said, here's my cleaning supplies that they left me. And here's some other things, just kind of nice tchotchkes and things for moving into an apartment that, I mean, you come to your house and it's got a yellow door, you got your own keys, you go in and somebody baked you muffins. Whatever the thing is, those intangibles and those helps. Also, as long as your folks can pass a background check, I always say too, sometimes it's just kind of adopting one of these young people and letting them know, hey, if you need a mentor, a coach, a helper, somebody who can make a phone call for you, somebody who could help out with, changing that tire or whatever. There's lots of ways that your group could help directly. And there's even more ways that your group could spread the word in the community about things that could happen. My brother spent 36 or 37 years working for the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. I haven't reached out to my guy there yet, but that's my next call, is just how do we get the shipyard, and maybe they're already doing it, but I have a specific guy I'm going to call and say, hey, what would you like to do to help? But there are things you can do individually and through your networks. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, I think, we have partnered with KCR, but just one of the things with the FYI voucher that Greg touched on is it doesn't pay that last damage deposit. We have to come up with a way to pay that for our kids, because even with the voucher, landlords want that money down against a damage deposit. And so we have partnered with that. We have funding for that, but I think that will be an ongoing funding gap that we run up against, of how do we put that initial payment down to get youth into the houses. So we'll run into that, and we've been able to overcome it so far. And I think in our community, we'll be able to. Another thing, we had a dream, kids are moving in and just filling their fridge with food. Having them move in to have basic staples and a refrigerator with food. That's been a dream that we've been working with community partners on. You know, how do we, who do we call that would be like, yeah, you know, we'll go grocery shopping, we'll come fill the fridge with food so that when they move in, they have that. Cleaning supplies, the same thing. My kids don't think of how expensive the cleaning supplies and paper towels they use at my home are, but one's moving out in September and she's going to. But you know, we just don't think about that. And when you work with people who are really bordering on poverty, spending that extra $2 to $5, and these days probably 7 to 10 on Mr. Clean and on things that they want to keep their apartment nice and clean and smelling well, but just don't always have the funds to do it. So starting them out with those kinds of things can be super helpful.
I mentioned this guy, Michael Mira, who's been a very, very big leader in this movement statewide and been doing this stuff. I mentioned that MOU that we have, the Memorandum of Understanding with the housing authorities. He did that same thing back in 2012 with the housing authorities, and they pledged 1,000 vouchers, and it worked some places, but it didn't work like it needed to, and now it's going to. He and I got a chance to meet a young person who was literally homeless and had been for years living in encampments in Tacoma. And I mentioned, you know, we got her into an apartment on the last day she was 24, and she'll be there till she's 29. I moved her with Michael. We met her. We couldn't find her because she didn't have a working phone. She had a phone, but she had to go like to a library or someplace to get Wi-Fi to be able to send us an email during the day. We spent a whole Saturday just trying to find her in Tacoma. We finally found her. She was wearing slippers because her feet, with her health conditions and stuff from being homeless for so long, regular shoes didn't feel good. So she was wearing like bathroom slippers and walking from this place or this place to meet us at the library or someplace where she felt comfortable meeting us. And then we said, well, you want to go to Fred Meyer and just buy some stuff to move, you know? And she said, yeah, but had a hard time imagining what she would need, what she would want, what were we really offering? No, really, just pick out a few things. You know, we got her an inflatable bed because we didn't have a real bed. We got her a shower curtain, a chair, a little table where she could eat. So imagine an empty apartment that was clean and taken nice care of, but you have nothing to put in it. You know, oh, you're going to need some hooks for that shower curtain. You're going to need, you know, these other kinds of things. And the thing that hit me the hardest was she says, she's like, oh, that's more than generous. And no, I don't need that. And no, we're kind of, well, at my house, I have this. Would you like one of those? And at some point she says to me, could I get a nightlight? And I was like, yeah, you could get a nightlight, because she hadn't felt safe in a long time. And just having that little nightlight, she put fake security cameras up so that people would think that, you know, this was a bad place to try to invade or whatever. She had, you know, just that feeling. And the first week that we were there, it was just about Halloween. She got some friends and had some donations or whatever, put up Halloween decorations.
Yeah.
I got her a potted plant, and she noticed that other people had potted plants outside their apartment. So she started building a little garden outside of her place to say, you know, I'm in this neighborhood now.
Yeah.
And those little teeny things make a huge difference. But if Angela and if we don't have somebody to call, you know, and 25 young people, this community can support the extra needs of 25 young people. So
absolutely. And
we appreciate the opportunity to even talk about this with you. Part of our mission, I mentioned the Pied Pipering thing, is we're selling a vision, right? We see these young people as an asset to their community. And we see these young people, we work with them in partnership. And we think that it makes all of our communities better to do it. But if part of the story that we tell today is something that you can share with one other person, that's our experience, how it makes the biggest difference.
And I brought 10 of them, but this is a press release that will be on our website, but it's kind of tells the story. So if anybody wants that.
Good. Could I add two more things I thought of as you were talking?
Please,
Uh,
2,000 more.
as-
Until they
as
kick us out and the parade comes through.
We've got till 11:30.
As Greg was talking about the, fake stickers and fake cameras that people will put up, that's been one thing that we've really invested funds in is the Nest
Mhm.
doorbell things.
Mhm.
A lot of all of our kids come out of traumatic backgrounds, some more and less extreme, but living on their own, having a nightlight, not unheard of at all, right? Nighttime can be a really scary time, and that doesn't stop just because you hit adulthood. And so when Amazon has like the deals on the Nest doorbells, that's an excellent thing to be able to hand our youth, especially our girls who are moving into their first place. I was sitting at the ILF's office 2 weeks ago, and a girl came in and was having some safety concerns, and to be able to pull that out of a closet and just give it to them and give them peace of mind of who's behind the door, and they don't have to answer the door, has been great. Also, Orca cards. A lot of our kids may not have a car or insurance, and so having Orca cards on hand to give them to help them get to jobs and back and forth is also super, super helpful.
Okay. Well, that was wonderful. We hit the pumpkin hour, so. What strikes me is we're reading a book called So You Want to Stop Homelessness, Start Here. And one of the things they talk about is systemic change. And they put it in terms of basketball, the author did, and it made a lot of sense to me. I mean, I could figure, so like, even if you looked at professional football and then college football, now they pay the athletes. I mean, that's a huge systemic change. And it goes to all ways of recruiting and, what people, so that's what you're doing. You're doing something that actually change the system rather than just try to work within the system.
That's
So it's
right.
awesome.
And the pieces of this federal system have been there since 1990. So we haven't tried to do this particular thing in this particular way before, but the pieces of it have been lying around.
Yeah.
So it's just been these folks at the table in Kitsap seeing the vision, and especially Kirsten going, yeah, almost. Without Bethany, this doesn't work. But Bethany is the glue. And Bethany is going to personally be the glue to some other communities in a way that won't threaten what we're doing here in Kitsap. And then she's going to hire a couple people that are going to do this thing in other parts of the state. So we have gone from a patchwork thing to the beginnings of a statewide system. And then we're going to go back and ask the legislature again to reinvest. And I think they're going to say yes, because we've shown them that this can work. Once you show that it's not just a good idea, but it's actually right now, as we're talking, young people are moving into apartments.
Well, one thought that we had is with what they did with the Pendleton place is people sewed laundry bags. And
Yeah.
one of the things I was thinking we could
All
sew some bags and get some I don't know how they're going to do their laundry. Like if there's
They have washing machines that for the homes, they have washing machines and dryers.
okay. And so when my daughter graduated from or went off to college, somebody gave her a bag and some quarters were in it. I mean, times have changed. People are using their phones now and stuff, but things like
That would be great for both.
May I ask a question too?
Please.
I have a friend who just turned 21 who uses a wheelchair. And are any of these vouchers available for kids with disabilities?
All of these vouchers are available for kids with disabilities if they meet the other criteria. And then the criteria I mentioned for eligibility are for this specific voucher, but there are two other programs that the state offers that are a little different. One of them is called the Independent Youth Housing Program, and that's for people who are in foster care at any point, not just between 16 and 18, but they could have been in foster care at age 5, and they've got some eligibility for that. Angela's organization also runs that program. There's another one called the Young Adult Housing Program, which is for people who were never in foster care, but are in the same age range and have other difficulties. There are specific efforts at DDA, at the Department of Social and Health Services. There are other services specific to people, young people with disabilities. But if they meet the criteria for this foster care voucher, yes. And then there are also accommodations built into some of these vouchers. So for example, let's say that you got the voucher in Tacoma, but your services were in Bremerton. You're really supposed to stay in one place for a year. But if you've got any kind of issues where you need accommodations because your providers are in Kitsap County, there's provisions to take care of some of those things.
And if your friend is homeless or at risk of homelessness, they would qualify to be an Evergreen Bright Start, and we do have 3 ADA units there.
Thank you. I will definitely let him know.
Where is the Evergreen Bright Start building? Is it the one
It's 811 Warren, so
Okay.
yeah, right
So-
down from,
across from Keith?
exactly, right across from KCR.
So I think it would be really good for you to know also, and maybe the people, Bethany or whoever's working with them. The Kitsap Food Co-op has a special flower program.
Yeah.
With, I don't know if you know that already, but when Bill's Crossing opened, we had talked about doing something with them about like a gift card or something, see if people would sponsor gift cards to the food co-op because it's within walking distance. But
They offered that to us already, but that was, I love that name, Flower.
I do too.
That's so
It's
great.
so good.
Yeah, so they're gonna help out with that too.
Well,
Okay.
we were wrong about the time. Bremerton, the city of Bremerton said 12, but the signs on the street say 11. So
Okay.
if you're parked on the
We're
street,
social workers, we're flexible.
You know,
This is what we do.
Right.
And we appreciate the opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, what other
Yes.
questions you got, Connie?
It was just, I mean, if you wanted to just do things, like gift cards, does that go to your program? Or?
It could go either,
It could
yeah,
Go to you too?
either one, yeah. Yeah.
At the annual meeting?
What?
Would, help me out here.
Would they be willing to speak at the annual meeting if we're gonna put forth the housing proposal?
I'm working on it.
We are, one of our every year in May, we adopt our program for the next year to 2 years.
Okay.
And so, Amy Waterman has put together this amazing proposal of work, and it is all around, housing insecure
Okay.
individuals. And, it's a big umbrella, that terminology. So there are a lot of things that can fall under that. In the meantime, it doesn't preclude us from doing other things.
Sure,
It just,
sure.
because certainly the League of Women Voters, I have to say, I've just been doing research because I'm putting together a little exhibit. In 1920, League of Women Voters, the very first thing that they lobbied for was I think it's the Shepard-Townsend Act. And it was for maternal and infant care funds to be provided by the federal government. So 1920, here we are in 2024, we're still doing. the
100
same
years
damn
later.
thing. So, we're not making big progress.
It's hard.
I do think, I mean, my hope is, and my belief is that this is changing the trajectory and the system for some of these youth. When we talk about parents who are getting stable housing with their youth, those are children who aren't living on the street, who aren't living in the cold, who aren't at risk at coming into CPS. We've started a group we call Connected Parents, and once a month we do a family style meal for that parent, their partner, the children, family style meal. And we're seeing them come around and support one another of, yeah, I can babysit, so you go to work. And when these different things happen, and a normative family activity like Play-Doh, carving pumpkins, things, because a lot of our kids will say, I know what I don't want to be, but I don't know the kind of parent I do want to be. And learning those things and weaving in some child development and parenting component to that. We just feel as you combine all of these things, that's an infrastructure that's going to prevent other children from coming through the system and enduring that trauma.
And those are things for the individual person, but as you were talking about 1920, when women get to vote and things like that, right? And the history of the Pacific Northwest and innovation and other things like that have brought us all to today. I've worked around legislature and United States government and things like that for my whole career. And I have a belief that these questions of where do we agree really matter. There's so much time spent talking today about where people disagree or you're right or you're wrong or those types of things. One of the things I like about this is it's an example of when government actually works. And whether you are on the conservative side or the liberal side or the independent side or whatever, wherever people are politically, I think that they deserve a government that actually works when it's supposed to do something. And so, it's great that this program's been around since 1990, but I like the fact that we're making it actually happen in communities, one young person at a time and 25 young people at a time. And, I think it has the ability to change a lot of people's experience with what it means to be civically engaged people.
But it also seems like it's responsive to their actual needs.
Yes.
Not not the needs that we think that they have.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's the bottom line is you have to meet people where they are and help with what is actually needed.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
hard to do sometimes when you get a committee.
Robin is our president.
Okay.
I'm just gonna hide my name.
Well, thank you again, and
Thank
you very much.
Victoria knows how to get a hold
This
of
was
me, so.
awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you very, very, very much.